Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And I have lost track of what part we're in, but our topic today is spiritual care in food preparation. And so, as usual, we're going to start with a reflection. I sit here comfortably and reflect on the significance of meditating with the eyes open. Over time, a separation has developed between spirituality and day-to-day life. Even the most basic aspects of day-to-day life, such as eating, walking, moving around, driving the car, even something so basic as keeping the eyes open. I do not want that deep sense of peace I experience when I'm in seated meditation to be separated from my day-to-day life. I want to learn how to integrate spirituality into my life so that I live spiritually. Even the most mundane tasks performed with that sense of deep peace. And it begins now. Experimenting with open-eyed meditation. My first step towards integration. Bringing that spiritual care into every aspect of my day-to-day life. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to all who've joined for Interview with Raj Yogi. So I believe we are in part 2 for spiritual care and food preparation. And we did digress a little bit last week, but for important reasons in terms of what the spiritual care means. And so there's an overlap with previous sessions, of course. And of course, because we're talking about Raja Yoga, one of the things I came up and what I was thinking about was, thank you, Binny. Yes, it's part 2, spiritual care and food preparation, was about this aspect of, we had mentioned about last week, would one just become just extra sensitive in terms of how we really take care of what happens with food. What is this all for in a bigger, sort of on a larger scale? What is this all about? And I think if I can recall, you were mentioning about, what is having to go back to what the point of Raja Yoga is about. And as we had mentioned last week about food, such a sensitive topic, and there's a lot of different perspectives when it comes to why one has any kind of different particularities about food choices. And when it comes to this aspect of soul consciousness, how can it be something that actually can actually benefit others as well when it comes to food preparation, as opposed to you're just trying to, change somebody else's food diet, which isn't really what the point is.
Just sharing a bit of an experience I had. And I think it might also tie in with a question that came last week about specific, recipes, etc. There is someone I know who is an excellent cook. And they went through a period where it was recommended that they, for just a short period of time, maybe remove certain types of food from their diet. And I think it included wheat and maybe sugar, a few different foods. And I remember thinking, my goodness, what will they eat? It's like there's nothing left. And I went to visit them. And again, they're an excellent cook. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because these ideas were introduced for the sake of the body. And it's amazing what we will do for the care of the body. And so I went to go visit them. They're an excellent cook, creative cook. There were no recipes available for what they needed to do. But just, that sort of acceptance and determination to care for the body. It's amazing, they say that invention is the mother of, or necessity is the mother of invention, that they just sort of developed these recipes that honored the disciplines that they needed to maintain for the sake of the body. So I went to visit them, and it was delicious, like incredible food that they were creating, even though there were all these restrictions. So when we talk about specific recipes, it's amazing actually what we come up with when we're kind of open to the idea, and how they were actually able still, because they cook quite a bit for others, to care for others. But when I would go and visit, so I'm bringing that up in terms of this concept of specific recipes that, although we certainly can share, it's amazing what you will be able to create on your own once we really wrap our heads around wanting to do this. But it's not for the sake of just the body that we're doing it. It's for the sake of the self, the soul. And I hear so many people willing to make all sorts of so-called sacrifices, and they get very inventive and creative when they're concerned about the health of the body, and just sort of exploring the idea of being that concerned for the health of the self, the soul. So that's very important, I think, and the welfare of other souls as well. But when I visited the same individual when I first came into the study, and I'm the other end of the spectrum, a very ordinary cook, very plain actually. And I remember I would cook the meals according to the diet that we observe, the spiritual diet. And it wasn't actually about the recipe or the food, because as I said, I'm quite a boring, ordinary cook. But what I was very focused on was the important part that actually feeds us, was the care and the vibration. Still honoring the content, if you will, but really paying attention to the vibration, the manner in which the food is prepared. And I remember serving the food to the soul. And as I say, they're a gazillion times better cook. But they said, wow, this tastes really good. And I was like, it's not very well seasoned. And I'm like, I'm wondering what their experience was. They kept saying, yeah, this. And the word they kept using was, this feels nourishing. And I found it really interesting because this soul is extremely sensitive. Nora knows this soul and knows exactly how particular they are. They're an excellent cook. They love to cook for others, but they're very accomplished. I think they were a chef in their previous birth. They know it, they can replicate a recipe of something they taste without having, sorry, they can replicate a dish without having the recipe just by tasting it. They're that aware of spicing. So here I am with this very almost bland, and they're saying it's tasting so, and they said they kept saying, I don't know what it is. It's just so nourishing. And so, we're very concerned about these two aspects, the health of our own body and care of others. And we tend to keep it on mostly a physical plane, but it's quite fascinating once we introduce the spiritual care, the spiritual dimension, the welfare of the self, I, the spiritual being in this body, as well as the spiritual care of others. So I'm going to have to pay attention to the spiritual preparation of food. So both the body and the self benefit. It's not one or the other, it's both. And I think it's something we ultimately have to experiment with, is even something so simple as cooking peacefully. Even if I have no awareness of being a soul, nothing, just cooking peacefully makes a massive difference in the care of the self. The body will benefit, and also if cooking for others, they will benefit as well.
It's interesting you're sharing it, even though I might not have an awareness of being a soul. And I don't know, we kind of talked about this in previous sessions, but if you were to ask a person, if you knew that somebody was cooking something you're making in a really angry state, it's a good question. Would people actually, if they were to know that, would they actually want to eat that? It's kind of like a subconscious thing.
Absolutely. Again, we understand this on a physical level. There used to be the sort of idea in some kitchens, souls that worked in a restaurant. So they saw the kitchen and they saw the front end as well where it's served. And after they left, they said, I would never eat there, because they were aware of the activity in the kitchen. And that's on a physical level. They're just aware of what's going on a physical level, the chaos and the pace and the intention. But once you start to get into so we're very aware. If we know it's not a clean kitchen, whatever, we're like, I don't want to. If we could see, but if we had a special machine that could also bring in awareness of the vibration, which is far more. There is a principle in spirituality that the more subtle the energy is, the more impact it has. So that goes from solid to liquid to gas to invisible to subtle and then completely invisible. As you get increasingly more subtle with the energy, it actually has a greater impact. So we could look on a very gross level and kind of be a bit, distressed by what we see in the kitchen. But if we could go deeper, what's the vibrational attitude of that or atmosphere of the kitchen? Do I really, am I really aware of that? So yeah, I think that if people knew, I think that we deep down do know this makes a difference. They knew the food was prepared in a very upset or frustrated or anxious way, they might be a little concerned. We love food that's cooked with love.
It's interesting because even just on a general level, that we are really much affected by intention. That may not necessarily be a spiritual thing, but just when you feel that somebody has good intentions or bad intentions, when you find out they have bad intentions, it's like, I don't care what they're doing. I don't want to have anything to do with whatever they're giving me if it was from ill intentions, second agendas. And so it's interesting that, that goes already into an invisible level. Attitudes, for example, we're not even really paying attention to how that can affect things.
Yeah. And I like the word clean because it crosses over many spectrums from the very physical into the spiritual. We love a clean cooking area. And but also when we talk about intention or energy, we like clean energy as well. So ultimately, I think that care is that cleanliness, as much cleanliness as possible on every level.
Do you feel that the more I really get to know myself and experience myself of who I really am, part of this whole clean energy, that it would just make more sense in terms of what would be more aligning for what matters to me at all levels?
Yeah, we've talked about this a few times that as we experiment with spirituality, with the awareness of being a soul, it seems to change our sensitivities so that the more I experiment with that, it's as if our sensitivities became a bit numb. So we're missing a lot of information. Not that the information isn't there, but we're kind of numb to it. It's a bit like perhaps you've experienced it, that I just suddenly had this experience and I'm constantly laughing at myself. Recently had to acquire a new car. It's a completely different make. It's very different. And it's a car that I didn't really think was very common or popular. And now I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing this car everywhere. And I keep asking myself, has it always been this prevalent, this makeup car? Like there'll be days when I'm at the intersection, there's 5 of us in this car, the same car. Like, has it always been? Is it just after? And it's again awareness. It has always been there, but I wasn't aware because I wasn't experiencing it. The moment I experience it, I'm more sensitive to that particular aspect. So there's a lot of spiritual information constantly happening, whether it's vibration or attitude, etc. Lots of it always happening in the atmosphere, but we're a bit numb to it because of our awareness. But the more I experiment with spirituality, that numbness starts to kind of, fade away, and I start to become more aware of the spiritual information that's always been there. So be more sensitive to what's going on in the various aspects of our life. And spirituality, even though we have disconnected a bit spirituality from our physical lives, it doesn't mean that, objectively speaking, spirituality is not completely integrated into our physical lives. Something as simple as money and the vibration money carries. I remember once working um, a contract with an oil and gas company. I was actually just a fitness instructor. They had a corporate gym in the company, but the human resources department wanted to have some special sessions for the employees, and they wanted a spiritual aspect introduced. And it was all very new for all of them, actually. And you could tell they were a bit nervous to open up to that. So it took probably a good hour and a half for them to warm up. And towards the end, I'll never forget, one of them asked the question. You could tell it probably had been sitting for a while, but maybe it was just being in the session, whatever. He said, I'm trying to figure out how to address the feeling or attitude I sometimes sense that I'm not viewed, or we're not viewed as an industry working with clean energy. And I found their question so powerful. Again, that word clean came up, and it covers so many levels. Everything from the physical, the way that they harvest the resource, is it a clean procedure? But even to the intentions and attitudes in managing the production, is that clean? And so we were just discussing the energy itself is just energy, right? It's oil, gas, whatever. But as the ones interacting with it, that's where it becomes clean or not clean. And I think that we're all aware of that. There's the physical matter, and then our interaction with that it's so integrated. Even if we choose to ignore it, it's still happening. So spirituality helps me to become sensitive to the invisible aspect of day-to-day life that's always been there, but I became numb to. It's not so much that we're introducing spirituality, it's always been there. I am becoming awake to spirituality.
I was remembering prior to you sharing about this, about when I learned in physics about wavelengths of energy, and you've got the visible spectrum, then you got radio waves and X-rays and gamma rays. It's interesting. It is physical, but there's this thing that's in I think it's in Winnipeg, in one of the hospitals there, called the gamma knife. You can't see it, but they can actually do surgery, on people's brains without actually opening up their cranium. So that's a physical power. But now we're talking about something that's really invisible, that even scientists try to find instruments to try to capture some measurement of spirituality. But it's in a way kind of ironic, because within ourselves as beings, whether we're aware of ourselves or as souls or not, we seem to have a sensitivity when someone gives us bad vibes or good vibes. So we already sort of have this measurement tool, so to speak, within ourselves, instead of having to seek outside, especially when it comes to spirituality.
Yeah, definitely. It's there, and we're just trying to refine that inner compass, that inner sensitivity, so that we can make more caring decisions.
In terms of this aspect of soul consciousness and food, do you feel that, just when you're talking about that relationship with matter, then that is bigger than, as you were mentioning about just food, it's my relationship with matter, my relationship with food in itself, because it does seem like food is one of the biggest sensitive topics in the world. It has become, as we mentioned, somehow in the political world, it's in this aspect of a relationship building. It's and I know we talked a little bit last week about why food. Why is it such a big thing?
It's very connected to sustenance. For many, it's connected to expressions or gestures of love. As you said, relationships. It is the body is made of matter. And it is a very, it's a form of matter we're introducing into the body. And this is the most intimate relationship the soul have, is with this body. So it's it's a bit like the driver in the car. What I kind of feel I put into the car, it really affects my experience in that car. So it's really affecting this matter in which I'm sitting, and I think that's why it's quite interesting in terms of all the different resources we interact with on the planet. But also it's come to represent so many different aspects of sustenance. So it's got very loaded feelings to it. So it's something to really, it can so deeply affect. Even, I remember once hearing, perhaps we've quoted it before, but one of the senior teachers sharing, of the Brahma Kumari, sharing that her feeling that, to prepare food peacefully, if that was to happen through the entire planet, 50% of the conflict in the world would end just through eating food that's prepared in spiritual consciousness peacefully, without any teaching, nothing, without any spiritual study. That the soul really takes the fragrance of the food, even unintentionally. It's that, when it comes to physical food, you've got to put it into the physical mouth. You have to consciously. But with spirituality, souls don't even need to know what vibration is in there, and they're going to absorb it, which would make us be more careful.
I was reminded, and for those who have questions, you're welcome to put that into the chat box on YouTube, chat box and Instagram. Just let us know. This aspect of food, and you see in certain faiths where there is the fasting piece, and there is also in hatha yoga in terms of just renouncing physical food completely. What is the purpose of that kind of endeavor on a spiritual level?
Sometimes it's a memorial, right? Physicalizing a memorial, a spiritual memorial. So taking a fast. There is also a lot of denial and asceticism that has been connected to spirituality, that the soul does want to become clean. It does want to become clean and free of waste. And this idea of trying to remove anything, remove these different aspects of our life, to detach, this kind of interesting, distorted pursuit of cleanliness and purity. The idea that, okay, then I'll just remove all food whatsoever, and then I know that nothing is going, nothing impure is going in, but also nothing is going in. So it's not very sustainable. And it's so connected to basic ideas that we have about even something like meditation. I can't seem to have a clean or pure thought, so I'll just stop thinking. Right? This is our concept of meditation. That's not possible or sustainable. We need to think to function in the acting world. So rather than stopping all thoughts in order to be clean and pure, why not introduce clean and pure thoughts? So rather than stopping food, why not introduce clean and pure food? So you can understand what the intention is. And again, spirituality frightens people because it's so connected with loss and denial and asceticism and sort of very harsh disciplines for this pursuit of cleanliness and purity. And the intention is great, but it's not sustainable. And it at times is quite violent. So why not instead integrate purity and cleanliness into our lives rather than going into this kind of denial? So you can see where these memorials or these intentions, these different practices come from, what the intention is. But again, is it sustainable?
It is related to this topic because I guess you can take this topic of spiritual care and food preparation out of context, and now it's all about the food, or even a subtle form of asceticism. Oh, I can't eat this thing, I can't eat that thing. But when you were sharing this, remind me, why we keep staying with the whole spiritual care part is because it seems like there's such a profound foundation that is required, and you can sort of miss the boat.
Yeah, I compare it to for a while I lived with a lovely family, and one of the daughters was a wonderful cook and very generous. She liked to cook for others, and very enthusiastic and very elaborate things. I remember one occasion she was making a birthday cake for a friend's birthday. And that was my evening. In this family, we each had an assigned evening to prepare dinner. So that was my evening to prepare dinner. And I knew what was going to happen because I had seen it on many occasions. So she went in, and I think she used every possible cooking appliance and tool in the kitchen. And I knew that she was going to run out of time. Very elaborate, beautiful cake. Was running late, ran out the door with the cake, and left a complete disaster in the kitchen. And I remember going in, and although I wasn't in the study or anything, we're very sensitive to this, really, that I can't start to prepare the food in this environment. It just feels, it's not even that it's physically, kind of an explosion, but that there's a freneticism in the room. And the act of actually cleaning the kitchen was very meditative. So it was both cleaning it physically, but also kind of organizing the atmosphere as well. And that kind of physical preparation before we cook the physical food, I think is very common for many people. I think they understand that. We're just taking it again into that subtle level. Is there some internal preparation I need to do before I start to prepare the food? Is there a certain state of being I would like to be in? And you already discussed the idea of what if I'm angry? So is there a certain state? And quite frankly, when we are angry or distracted, that's when we start to cut fingers with a knife and things are falling on the floor and all that sort of stuff. So it affects on many levels, but just as we might physically clean the kitchen, kind of calm down the atmosphere, some internal preparation. And then we actually kind of enjoy. And it's amazing what kind of solutions come. So going back to the idea of recipes, for me, I mean, my favorite meal is dessert. So when I came into this study, and one of the disciplines of food preparation is that we don't use eggs. And when you are, I'm actually a baker, is what I like to do. So when it comes to baking, I mean, there's eggs all over the place. But there was this real sense of, but I enjoy baking, so I want to keep baking. And I remember I was just in that state of baking is going to continue, but I want to honor these food disciplines. And there was just the state of mind I was in. It came so clearly into my mind. Somehow I remembered grade 8 science, and it came very clearly into mind what I would have to do using the materials I had available in the kitchen to make an egg replacement. I didn't have egg replacement that you buy in the store. I was just going to take some raw materials and prepare an egg replacer. And it was so interesting. It's like, well, you'd put this in. I thought, where's this idea coming from? Huh? And many years later, I saw this egg replacer you can buy in the store, and I looked at the ingredients, and it was all the things that I was using, all the same raw materials that I use in this crazy concoction. And all I'm saying is that it's amazing how things sort of work when you're in a certain alignment internally. Solutions come, there's much more care, there's less accidents. So it's just interesting to experiment, to take that moment to check what state of being am I, the soul, in.
Now, I know you mentioned about eggs, and it's another part of the sensitive topic about food. But since this is about food preparation, why are there particular things that we don't use, given this aspect of studying that I am a soul?
It relates a bit to the idea of a sattvic diet, which is meant to support a peaceful state of mind. And so obviously we want to try and avoid any types of food that involve violence or violations, if you will, of different forms of life. Now, someone often argues, well, when you pull that carrot out of the ground, that's a violence. And it's probably true that a lot of what we're doing, we probably can't get away from. There's the intention of profit in so much, like really it's everywhere, which is why we want to be especially aware of the headspace we're in as we're preparing the food, because that's where we can transform the vibration. There's probably violence in almost every, even if I know we get into vegan, vegetarian, that's really not ultimately what this is about. I mean, there's some basic guidelines that set a nice base for us, but we're still going to have to pay attention to the headspace we're in, because even if I follow all the surface guidelines, the content, there's still, even at that level, some vibrational issues in terms of the food that we purchase, unless you're in one of those lucky situations where we're seeing this with more and more BK sites around the world. They do yogic farming, where they actually grow as much as possible their own food and actually have spend time in yoga with the seeds and with the food. So that's a completely, I don't think most of us have that luxury. Most of us are going to the store and buying the raw materials. So we're still going to have to clean up the vibration. But there are some basic guidelines that we follow to take care of the sort of gross aspects of violence and violation.
Is that why, though, then that basis of is this study interesting to me to the point where, it is, there's something that I'm seeking on a deeper level, that's why I want to pursue the study that kind of drives things. Otherwise, it
Absolutely.
can sort of go in an odd direction.
I always feel it boils down to ego or self-respect. I spending time in the fitness industry, I have, when it comes around food, there's two aspects. Maybe we should do one on movement next, but there's two aspects to
in movement.
yeah, we'll just dance in every session. There's two aspects in fitness. One is exercise and the other is nutrition. And they each have subcategories, of course. So food is a huge part of physical endeavors as well. And working with athletes who are preparing for competitions, you would not believe the disciplines. They will extreme disciplines they observe. Nothing compared to what we're talking about. Extreme disciplines they observe in preparation for a competition. And you go, how are they doing that? Why are they? Once your head, in this case, it might be ego, once your head has wrapped around that, you're unstoppable. You make it happen. No one has to push you. You just, I want to do this. I will do whatever it takes to fulfill that demand of, in this case, ego. Now, imagine if these things were in service to self-respect. We're talking about disciplines of self-respect. That's really what we're talking about. I'm taking care of my self-respect through these various disciplines in my spiritual life because we're trying to nurture soul consciousness through every single discipline. So it's amazing what we'll do, at the bidding of ego. I've seen crazy stuff, and we don't bat an eye. And so I always find that a very interesting thing to consider. Everyone says, well, of course that's what they have to do. They have to do that for their competition. They have to look a certain way on the stage. They have to do that for their they have to eat that food or deny themselves water or whatever they're doing at any particular point. It's for their competition. I thought, wow, it's very acceptable under the right conditions that, other people in the world would die for some water. That's not acceptable. But, so it's very how the context, whatever whatever our ego has decided, we bow down to that. It'd be lovely to do things in service to self-respect.
I really love learning this study, this aspect of experiment and see for yourself. I know we're running close to actually way past time, but we were a little late once again.
I feel we're getting better.
All right. Well, thank you.
At the technical preparation. Forget about the food preparation. We should have something spiritual care and technical preparation.
We may have another part 3 because I feel that there's some questions had come up for the request of this particular topic. And so perhaps we'll have a little reflection.
The beauty of a spiritual study is that it gives me the time, the space, the information, the knowledge to really explore the foundation of my life and what creates quality of life. We used to think that quality of life was based so much on the physical aspects, the type of car we drive, the home we live in, yes, the people we know, our way of life, our profession. And all of these are important aspects, but that's not the foundation. What actually creates all of that is quite invisible. It is our awareness, our attitudes, our vision, our consciousness, insight, wisdom. These are the building blocks for quality of life. And how can we nurture and feed, strengthen those building blocks? That's what spiritual study affords me, that space to explore the foundation of my life and realizing that's not really optional, it's essential. How to feed that foundation, nurture it, and then watch as the physical emerges, align to what's happening with the spiritual. It's not a waste of time to take time and feed the interest in spirituality. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. And thank you, Benny, for your comments. So we want to just pass it over to Judy of upcoming sessions.
I will do my best. These will continue into July. I believe our website is now updated, the Calgary website, so you should be able to find there under online programs. So that's calgary.brahmakumaris.ca. Under online programs, everything should be there. So you'll see the interview with the Raj Yogi. These evening sessions will continue. Drop-in meditation Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays continues. We have a couple of workshops in English this month. So one is on July 10th, this coming Saturday, 12 to 1:30 p.m. And that's the Pure Self Within. And then we also have one on July 25th, 5 to 6:15 p.m., The Beauty Within. So a couple of those are on the website. There is also, I know, a course in Hindi. I believe the Raj Yoga course will be offered in Hindi over 2 weekends. So July 10th. So everything's coming up this weekend. So you can explore that on the website. The self-care with the young adults will continue Saturdays 3 to 4, and inner fitness will continue as well on Saturdays 2 to 3. So again, everything is much more clear on the website. You don't have to memorize everything I just said. We invite you to go there, and always feel free to email us if you have any questions or need more information. Thank you so much for joining this session today. Om Shanti.